In example, this is example 7. We are supposed to solve this using completing the square method. And I wish to introduce this, or rather to solve this question in two approaches. One, you realize that the coefficient of x squared is not 1. And we need to complete the square when preferably the coefficient of x squared is 1. So the most advisable approach, and this is what I'm starting with, is when you divide every term here with 2, because that does not change the meaning of the expression, it just shrinks it down. You simply get lesser figures to work with. So dividing everything by 2, we have x squared minus 4x plus 7 over 2, which is 0 over 2, which maintains its value to be 0. And of course, you can see the constant part, because we are expected to write our equation in the form of x squared plus bx. We can only do so, we can only do so if we take the constant part across. So we have x squared minus 4x is equals to negative 7 over 2. Completing the square on the left hand side, we have x minus 2. Of course, now this one should not be anything difficult to anybody. Of course, minus 4 over 2, which is 2 squared, is equals to minus 7 over 2. And moving forward, we have x minus 2 squared minus 4 is equals to minus 7 over 2. And of course, if you take negative 4 across, it's going to give you x minus 2 squared is equals to 4 minus 7 over 2, which this one gives you 4 minus 3.5 is simply a half. And therefore, we need to get the square root on both sides. We have something like x minus 2, which is equals to plus or minus the square root of a half. And since a half does not have a perfect square, it remains that way, and therefore x is going to be, when you let minus 2 cross over, 2 plus the root of a half, or x is equals to 2 minus the root of a half. And those are the two possible values of that question. You may realize that the root of 1 is simply 1, so this one can end up being 2 plus 1 over root 2, which can also, because 1 has a perfect square root and 2 does not. So 2 minus 1 over the root of 2. So those are the two possible final values, but I would want to give it a different approach. And instead of dividing by 2 at the very first step, I leave it to be like that. Instead of dividing by 2, I would wish to leave it that way and have something that that may look like this at the end of the day. So 2x squared minus 8x is equals to minus 7. I have not divided by 2 anywhere. And at this point, this gives me 2 is factored out. X squared minus 4x rather, is equals to minus 7. So as we complete the left hand side, we have 2 major bracket x minus 2 squared minus, of course, 4 over 2, which is 2. 2 squared is 4 minus 4, close the major bracket, is equals to negative 7. So when you open this bracket, it gives us 2, open bracket, x minus 2 squared minus 8, because these two affect the 4 as much as it affects this particular bracket, which continues to be negative 7. And if you look at the the left hand side, we still have 2x minus 2 squared is equals to minus 7 plus 8, which is a 1. Now, if you divide by 2 on both sides, then we have x minus 2 squared is equals to a half. If we square root on both sides now, this one brings us here, or rather let's just continue, which is going to give us x minus 2 is equals to plus or minus the root of a half. Meaning that at the end of the day, x can be equals to, when you cross over this negative 2 across, is going to be positive 2 plus the root of a half, which is 2 plus 1 over root 2, or x is equals to 2 minus the square root of half, which is basically 2 minus 1 over the square root of 2. Either way, you will get the same kind of values, but here you are very careful that you just don't want to continue working with the coefficient of x squared, which is anything else apart from 1. This is the recommended approach. Here you might forget this part. You might forget, you are likely to forget to open up this part. You are likely to forget that even this minus 4, or rather even this negative 4, is affected by this 2, and you are likely to forget that you are going to have negative 8. It is a very likely kind of a mistake that the students will make. So if you choose to continue working with the coefficient of x not being equals to 1, please remember to include here a major bracket which is opened in this particular step. Here, make the coefficient of x squared 1 as early as possible so that you don't have to remember to open any bracket along the way. Okay?